There are absolutely stunning places and things to see out on the water when you're enjoying a day of boating, but whatever you do, don't get too close, kind of like our crew did here on the Nikki when they wound up running aground this past week on the famous Formica Shoal off the coast of Sicily. According to the reports, the captain claims they lost control of the rudder, so the vessel had no ability to steer, and the next thing they knew, they wound up on the reef. Fortunately, no injuries were reported in this situation, but one of the wild and crazy things we'll witness in this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Mauritania, where this was the scene this past week when a collision occurred between two fishing vessels. The images here are from a PTZ camera on board the fishing vessel Right Whale. And here in a moment, you're going to see the Mauritanian flagged Tarfa 3 come into the scene, and the two boats wind up colliding, causing the chaos we're about to see unfold here, and also prompting a large-scale search and rescue operation. Here we can see after the vessels collide, for some reason the Right Whale still continues under propulsion, actually pushing the Tarfa 3 forward for several minutes after the initial collision. Here in a few moments, when you see the two vessels finally separate, you're going to see that the Right Whale has ripped a massive hole in the hull of the Tarfa 3, causing the fishing vessel to start to take on massive amounts of water and begin to sink almost immediately. At the time of the incident, there were 26 people on board the vessel. At the time, it happened so fast they claimed they were unable to get life rafts deployed and all began grabbing life jackets. It did not take long. Within a matter of minutes of these two vessels separating, the Tarfa 3 winds up sinking in about 150 foot of water. A massive search and rescue operation is quickly launched, and 21 survivors are quickly pulled from the water, while crews still work to try and find the other 5 individuals at the time of the incident. But obviously the big question in this situation is what exactly went wrong to lead us to this situation, especially considering we have video footage showing the moments before and all the way up to and through the impact. Here, with the video evidence, it doesn't appear that weather played much of a role in this. Obviously, it appears clear enough that we can see both ships, that both vessels, visibly by eye, should have seen each other coming. Now, it does appear that the Tarfa, based on the equipment on deck and trailing lines, was actually in the act of fishing at the time of the incident. But the actual cause of the accident has not been released by Spanish authorities at this time, so there's no telling whether this had to do with some sort of mechanical failure or if perhaps one or both of these wheelhouses were not occupied at the time of the incident. One thing is clear though, at the time of reporting on this, it appears the master and the first officer of the Right Whale reportedly have been arrested by local authorities as they start the investigation into what exactly went wrong. But it'll be interesting to see what the local authorities release as their probable cause after they get their investigation going. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Australia, where this was the scene just this past week as well, when two boaters went out to enjoy a day of fishing off the coast of Garden Island, when the next thing they knew, a wave wound up hitting their boat and capsizing their vessel. Fortunately, the crew was prepared, had a handheld VHF, and was able to get a call off to local authorities letting them know of their situation. Fortunately, as we mentioned, this crew was prepared for offshore fishing and they did have an EPIRB on board the vessel. They wound up activating it, and that gives local rescue operations their exact location and also the ability to divert others to the scene.
All vessels within 10 nautical miles, please make way to that area and render assistance.
Local Australian authorities were able to send out a distress call to all vessels in the area, giving the exact pinpoint location of the overturned vessel. Fortunately, in this situation, there was a commercial fishing vessel in the area, and it was the first on the scene due to its proximity and location, and was able to render assistance and pull the two men out of the water. This one serves as a reminder, whenever you're going offshore, always have all the proper safety equipment, as just in this case, it may wind up saving your life. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to keep us right along this same line, but bring us back stateside, when just this past week, the Coast Guard received an urgent message of a capsized 17-foot vessel off the coast of Sargent, Texas. According to the Coast Guard report, Coast Guard Air Station Houston immediately launched an air crew, and Coast Guard Station Freeport launched a 29-foot response boat to the scene. Once the air crew arrived on the scene, they launched their rescue swimmer, who swam over to the boat to assess the situation and get an idea of the condition of the people on board the vessel. They seemed to be fine, so they decided to go ahead and wait on the small response boat as the rescue ship versus airlifting everybody off the boat. Here we can see the rescue swimmer one by one assisting the 3 people off of the capsized vessel over to the small response boat for rescue. Now, at this time, the Coast Guard has not given any indication as to what possibly caused this ship to capsize. Here we can see the conditions don't look too terrible, but it doesn't take much when you're offshore for things to go wrong quickly. If a vessel starts to take on water at all of a sudden you can sit lower in the water, and once waves start coming over, they're pretty much not going to stop, and you're going to wind up in a bad spot. And again, kind of like we talked about in the last situation, this is why you always have all the proper safety equipment when you're going offshore. It's one of the most popular questions I see asked in a lot of boating forums. What should I have on my vessel? Which is always kind of a funny question. These guys will go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a boat, but then don't want to fork over $300 or $400 for an EPIRB. I always answer this question the same way. Yes, obviously the Coast Guard has a list of items you must have to go offshore, but the extras, such as an EPIRB, satellite communication, they get pricey, but how much is your life worth? Every single time I go offshore, I carry the basics that the Coast Guard tells me, but I also always have some sort of tracking device, and I also have some sort of satellite communication device that no matter what, I know if something goes wrong, I can get a hold of somebody and get help fairly quickly. But let me know in the comments below what your must-have item is on your boat if you're going offshore, or even a small list of your must-have items if you're going offshore, because I promise you, in the comments, if you read them, everybody's going to have a little bit of a different list, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong, but I'm just telling you now, if you go out there, you better be ready. Fortunately, in this situation, this crew winds up getting rescued and brought back to shore without injury. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to India, where this was the scene just a few weeks back when a large girder for an under construction bridge over in Uttar Pradesh was being loaded onto a barge when things went incredibly wrong really fast. Here we can see this is a complex operation as they're loading the large piece of the bridge onto the barge to be transported to the construction site. You can see almost immediately things start to go wrong as we see the barge almost begin to list as soon as they start to bring the piece of equipment on board, and it doesn't get any better from there. Here we see as they finally get it onto the barge, it starts to become disabled, and the next thing we know, it winds up collapsing off the barge and falling into the river. Now this one's been a little difficult to get information on, I'm assuming based on the location is why, but the few things that I have been able to find, it claims that the incident occurred back on August 26th of last month, and they're also saying that the massive weight of the bridge segment exceeded the barge's capacity, thus causing the barge to wind up listing and eventually causing the bridge piece to fall overboard into the river as we see in the images. Fortunately, according to every report I've seen, somehow miraculously, nobody was injured during the incident. Thanks for watching, crew. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening out on your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram and let us know, and you might see your stories over here. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button.